welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor at TCG Folk. This week we sit down with David Lauer, the new director of JFCS NextGen at Jewish Family and Children's Services in Minneapolis. We talk about his family ties to Jewish social service work, how he's evolving NextGen, and what he's planning for the organization this year on this week's Who the Folk podcast. David Lauer, thank you for joining us this week on the podcast.
I'm so glad to be here, Lonnie. Thank you for having me.
So you are the relatively new NextGen coordinator here at Jewish Family and Children's Services in Minneapolis. How long have you been in the job, for starters?
So it's just a little over 4 months now, so about a third of a year.
Okay.
I started in November, and it's been a lot of getting my bearings, figuring out the community over here. I actually am originally from the St. Paul area.
Okay.
So you said JFS at first, and both my mom and my grandmother actually worked at JFS of St. Paul for many years, which is kind of funny. Now I'm over here.
You're pretty familiar then with sort of the idea, if not the agency specifically of JFCS, because of that sort of family connection in St. Paul.
Absolutely. I mean, I was pretty familiar with JFCS, just adjacently, just knowing Jewish social services organizations and valuing that and wanting to work in a sort of helpful nonprofit humanitarian context. And originally I had really been looking more internationally. I had a temporary job with the American Refugee Committee. And then as that was ending, I thought, well, maybe I should take a look a little more locally, and ran into Todd Sandler, and now I'm here, and I'm really, really glad to be here. So,
what is it that drew you to the idea of working in Jewish social services in general?
Yeah, so I really have, JFCS is built around the concept of tikkun olam, making the world a better place, healing the world, and I've built a lot of my life around my own personal conception of tikkun olam. I think seeing a lot of stuff growing up, and really my grandmother, who was a Holocaust survivor, Esther Akos Winthrop, she passed away about 2 years ago, but she really was a huge, huge influence in me. And I kind of just figuring out, in college, I had been, before college, I was a little removed from my Jewish roots, but realizing in college that a lot of my human rights values and a lot of things I really cared about in the world really came from my Jewish heritage, sort of led me to really want to reconnect and realign my own personal goals with sort of some of the Jewish traditions that I realized they were connected to. Mm-hmm. And so it sort of worked really well that I feel like I can continue my grandmother's legacy in some ways.
Well, that's a very nice way of looking at it. I think sounds like she would enjoy that you're working in the Jewish social service space.
I really think she would, and I don't think she would have expected it either. It's funny. She's on my mind in part because today was March 15th. It's her birthday.
Oh.
This might not go up the same day that
it'll go up over the weekend, but yeah.
Yeah. I actually just noticed right before we started this conversation, and I was like, wow, that's great.
Well, that's serendipitous timing.
Yeah.
That it just worked out, that it just happened to work out that way.
Yeah.
So what have you sort of learned about not just NextGen, but JFCS as you settled into the position, and has it sort of changed your perception of what you want to do with the NextGen group as you go forward?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what really interested me about NextGen as an engagement and volunteer philanthropy group, I think at the root was tikkun olam and the connection to JFCS. And I think that's what really connects most of the board members and a portion of the participants with NextGen as well. But I had this kind of thought at the beginning when I first started talking about it, hey, I don't really want to coordinate a youth group. I want to coordinate something meaningful. I want to be helping connect people both meaningfully with their own thoughts and ideas, and then also with good volunteer experiences and opportunities here around the agency. And I think I've been able to do that, but there's also a lot of learning to do. Yeah. So there was a lot of that NextGen was already doing, but it also has and will continue to have a social role in the community.
Is there I've always had the perception of NextGen as this very positive force in the Twin Cities, and at least in the Minneapolis side. Running a youth group, that's sort of, I found that funny and sort of surprised me. Did you think that perception was out there?
Well, I don't know. I really I didn't know much about NextGen before. I guess I met with Todd Sandler at the beginning of September, and I'd come from the St. Paul side, and I wanted to connect more Jewishly, and and there are a lot of opportunities for really just fun social events, and I hope to be planning more of those with NextGen and in conjunction with the board. But I think the most important thing for me was that not be the core focus.
Okay.
And I don't think it was for NextGen before, but I do think there is that perception among some people. This is just a happy hour platform.
Sure.
And, and I think that is a role we can serve for some people, but it's not the core of what a JFCS youth engagement and volunteer and philanthropy group should be necessarily.
Okay.
So what are some of the are there newer programs or newer events that you're trying to sort of innovate and help get going to either, if not change the perception, certainly enhance?
Yeah, absolutely. So one popular program that NextGen has done in the past was a rabbi panel. And I'm sort of trying to figure out how we can bring that back in potentially a new way. We're looking at doing a philanthropy panel in conjunction with Macomb, probably this June, although we don't have a date set yet. And I'm really excited for that. Another area that is kind of new and sort of more in the meaningful discussion of social issues, but in a casual, easygoing setting, is a new program that we just had the pilot of actually last week. It's Tikkun Olam in the 21st Century, we're calling it.
Okay.
This one was focused on housing in the Twin Cities, and we worked with Jewish Community Action and Aaron Burke of JCA, who also is a former NextGen board member.
Oh,
so it was a really
And I know
nice...
affordable housing is one of JCA's really
big
pushes throughout the community.
Absolutely. And I kind of, my thinking was, as young people, as millennials, we're facing housing shortages, we're having trouble finding affordable housing, and also we're, at the same time, I think, removed from the issue. We don't necessarily recognize that, yes, we are some of the beneficiaries of potential affordable housing, but also we have a role in keeping in mind the makeup of our communities and thinking about how gentrification is working in Minneapolis and the western suburbs, and trying to fight to make it a good place for everyone. So I don't know. I really got interested working at Wells Fargo and living in Northeast, where I had a very expensive apartment that wasn't very well insulated. And then last winter, when it dropped below, -15, -20, suddenly the apartment wasn't staying above 55.
Ooh.
And it was kind of an eye-opener. So that's definitely been a personal interest area for me. But we've got some exciting new, hopefully, programs for Tikkun Olam in the 21st century. I'm really interested in looking at the intersection of Jewish and queer identity, and have a couple friends in the arts community who are really interested in looking at that as well. And then we're also thinking about looking at Jewish history and immigrant history coming into Minneapolis, how, many Jews moved to North Minneapolis thanks to redlining in the 40s and 50s. And once again, that's also a personal connection for me, because my grandmother actually was resettled by JFCS back in, about 65, 70 years ago now.
Okay.
So when she and her family came from Greece here to Minneapolis.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. All the family connections that... Did you know about that JFCS had resettled her before you started working here, or is that something you sort of learned, sort of after the fact?
I did. I mean, it wasn't at the forefront of my mind. I knew there was this connection, and she had told me, and it was kind of important. And having that root in, resettlement for refugees really was part of what drew me to JFCS, and part of what I said, yeah, I think this is going to be a great place for me.
Well, that's very cool. Yeah. Okay, that was an interesting aside. But one of the things you mentioned is, partnering with Macomb, which is the Adath 20s and 30s group, and JCA through the, in the Tikkun Olam in the 21st century with those programs. How important is it, I should say, to you to work with a lot of the organizations out there that are already doing some of this stuff, but it sort of helps get your audience in front of them and them in front of your audience?
I think that's critical. I think we've got a pretty robust community with a lot of different organizations doing a lot of really cool stuff. And it's just, I hear a lot of people say this, but I think it's really incumbent on us to not try and, quote unquote, compete for resources or constituents, and instead just, reinforce each other and reinforce the community. I think that's what NextGen should be, is a connector, a way for people to find valuable ways to engage and support the community through JFCS, but also hopefully find valuable ways to engage Jewishly or non-Jewishly in the community through other avenues as well.
And because there are already organizations that do some of those things, why are you reinventing the wheel? Well, why should anybody reinvent the wheel when you could partner and work together?
Yeah, I mean, and running a really high-quality, well-programmed event is hard to do as, a single person with limited resources, right, even with the wonderful support of JFCS. So working with another organization that has different sets of expertise, for instance, running Tikkun Olam in the 21st century, Aaron Burke was amazing with leading discussion and helping come up with really great discussion questions, resources, stuff that I wasn't necessarily prepared to do as effectively. And, his background in organizing gave him the perfect base, basically. Yeah.
So as, you look, beyond this year, I know it's obviously, it's only March, there's a lot of year left, but, as you look beyond that, what are you hearing from either your board or the people who attend some of the events that they're interested in, that they want to, are there some people that just, they're happy to come for the happy hour every quarter and that's fine, but are there others who are looking to get, more engaged in a deeper level? Yeah,
I mean, there's definitely both. I hear from some people, hey, I'm going to come to your parties, they're great, but volunteering, not really my thing. But a lot of the people, especially the board members and the people who are really engaged, they're saying, what I'm most excited for is, say, the PCHP graduation, which is coming up on May 19th. We're going to be volunteering to support that.
PCHP?
So that's JFCS's Parent-Child Home program, which is a really cool program that supports a lot of immigrant and lower-income families who are coming into who are trying to prepare their kids for kindergarten, especially, and it has home visitors who speak the language of the participants coming to help educate on sort of ways to learn through play, and they bring toys and books and reinforce good parenting habits that parents already typically tend to have, and it's really has an incredible benefit on people for long-term in, being prepared for kindergarten, being prepared to kind of grow up in the American education system, I think. Sure. And their graduation ceremony, these kids are pretty young, they're just getting ready to go to kindergarten. It's a really exciting, they've really done something great, I think, in PCHP. Yeah. And I haven't participated in the graduation yet. I'm really excited for this one, but one of my board members was saying it's my absolute hands down favorite thing that we do as NextGen. It's just, the kids, seeing the joy on their faces and everything is really a wonderful, wonderful volunteering experience. And so I'm really excited for that one.
Oh, that's fun.
We've also got, one of the things NextGen does is provide leadership opportunities for young people, and our board session is coming to an end in May, so we're looking for new board members. And that's something I'm excited to have, that opportunity for people who maybe haven't been engaged or really want to, find a way to give back to the community or just learn more about being on a board or doing philanthropy. That should be a really good opportunity for 6 to 7 new people coming up this May, June.
If people are interested in being on the board, how do they throw their hat in the ring for it?
Oh, yeah. Email me at dlauer@jfcsmpls.org.
Okay.
Or you can also find my contact info on the JFCS website. But yeah, just drop me a line, give me a call. You also can get in contact with Dana Rubin at JFCS.
So does NextGen sort of, in a ideal world, does it serve as like a feeder system for the main JFCS, if you will?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure on the exact numbers, but I know at least 3, maybe more, NextGen board members have gone on to be on the JFCS board.
Okay.
And we've seen NextGen members go on to other leadership roles throughout the community, which is really exciting. There are NextGen people in Hillel now, working with Yala, formerly run by Charlie Smith,
yep.
And that's really exciting. I think it's one sort of leadership learning opportunity, but it really is, some of the people who have been engaged in it, most of the time, they're engaged in other ways around the community. They're also learning to be leaders, and they're really doing cool stuff in other ways. But I think it's been a really cool opportunity for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it's great that an organization with, the size and the history and as well regarded as JFCS offers this opportunity too.
Yeah.
To the up and coming members of the community to get involved and get some leadership training and sort of do things in a different way than they might not otherwise get to do until they were older or more established.
I completely agree. And I think some boards tend to more towards the older end, and I think JFCS has really benefited from getting some younger people coming off the NextGen board, in their early 30s, straight into the JFCS board, providing that different perspective.
Yeah, and I think, most organizations, speaking as somebody who's younger, I think need the younger perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of times because, you get basically the same people sitting around the table, you tend not to get a whole lot of diversity in the opinion.
You can get stuck in your ways. And I think, part of why NextGen was created was we were seeing at JFCS a lot of the volunteers tended towards the older end. People who were engaged as donors tended towards the older end. And there also was kind of a weakness, I think, in the community and the messaging that not everybody knew everything JFCS was doing. And people still don't. It's a great organization that does all kinds of things.
Right, and it's huge.
Yeah.
It's doing a ton of stuff.
Even as an employee, I don't know every program or, all the ins and outs.
Sure.
But that being said, I think learning that JFCS is for everybody. Anyone in the community can come and get great counseling services, get mental health support services, get support if they have aging parents or, if they have a young kid who they want to raise more Jewishly, they can take part in the PJ Library program. There are all kinds of different ways both community members and people who aren't in the Jewish community can get really great support from JFCS. And I think getting that information out is part of my job as NextGen to a different set of people who wouldn't necessarily be engaged with that information otherwise.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like there's great things coming up, and we're excited to see you put your stamp on the program as it goes forward. Last couple questions. Favorite Jewish food?
Okay, well, gosh, that's a tough one. I'm really a sucker for latkes and sufganiyot.
Okay.
I've always loved Hanukkah, and those are great. But right now, I've been really jonesing for Hamantashen.
Okay, so obviously, like you said, it's March 15th. It is 5 days before Purim starts, so I suppose it is that time of year that it's Hamantashen.
Yeah. My grandma has a great Hamantashen recipe that I think kind comes from. So she was a Greek Jew, and those Mediterranean fruits really can, a nice blend in there.
So
it's really good.
Which filling is your favorite then?
So we do a combination of dates, apricots, and I'm not sure everything that's in the filling.
Okay.
It's been a year since
it's a blend.
It's a blend, yeah. But it's a blend with a little chunky, great sweet flavor. Oh, plums are in it for sure. I think. And I'm excited to make some of those again. But I'm actually also not a fully Jewish food, but for me it is because of my grandma's heritage. Okay. Making spanakopita tonight, which is a personal favorite, and I think the Greek Jewish is kind of a unique spin, but that spanakopita and often vegetarian stuffed peppers or that kind of stuffed tomatoes. Those are the kinds of things I had for high holiday meals sometimes, and excited to make some of that sort of in memory of my grandmother. So.
Oh, and favorite Jewish holiday?
Well, I have two. I think for meaning in the larger community and what I value out of Judaism, I love Passover. Okay. The idea of liberation, the idea that all of us are in bondage and we really need to fight to make everybody free. That really strikes a chord with me. But personally, for celebrating with my family here in just this very cold, dark state, Hanukkah with the lights in the dark, and I just always have been a sucker for lighting the menorah and singing Ma'atzur, the usual.
Yes. Well, David Lauer, thank you very much for welcoming us into JFCS this week, and thanks for being on the podcast. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Lonnie.
Thanks again to David Lauer for joining us this week. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the podcast. We're on Apple Podcast, Google Play, Spotify, and others. If you have suggestions for people who should be on the podcast, please email them to me. I can be reached at editor@tcjewfolk.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next week.